Kyle with All in Survival. Today, we're going to go back into the prepper classroom. We're going to talk a little bit about survivalists, preppers, and homesteaders. And in what are the differences and what are the kind of the overlappings a little bit. Now, they get used interchangeably in some ways, but we're going to try and break them down a little bit. And maybe you fall into one of those categories more than the other. That's okay. All right. What is a survivalist? A survivalist is somebody who's an outdoorsman, and they focus on very specific skills. Starting fire, building a shelter from what's in nature, boiling water or purifying water by boiling most of the time, and hunting and trapping. All of these things kind of fall into the survivalist, outdoors enthusiast, right? And a survivalist is very focused on skills, and the amount of gear that they bring is usually much less than somebody would consider themselves a prepper. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have lots of preps at home, and it also doesn't necessarily mean that they don't live on a homestead. But somebody who falls into a survivalist genre are going to be very specific on their skills. Now, we'll move on to a prepper. A prepper is somebody who, in general, is probably a little heavier on the equipment and the gear. And one of those things that they need to work on most is skills. So, preppers usually fall into those people who live in larger cities, urban environments, somebody who stockpiles lots of foods and medical supplies and sanitation supplies and supplies in general, right? And they're learning skills all the time. They specifically set time aside for communication and firearms training and bushcraft skills. But they're usually not somebody who spends a ton of time out in the environment. They're going to be heavily based on equipment, right? A lot of times, preppers will fall into more of a tactical, right? They're gun guys. They have lots of tools in their gun safe. And this is fun. It's sexy. They like to spend money in that particular genre. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they've done really well in medical supplies, or they may have a lot of rice and beans, but they don't have anything else. So a prepper is very, very wide. It's a wide berth. There's a lot of things that can fall into that category. Lastly, we're going to talk about homesteaders. And in my opinion, homesteader is the best of all of them, right? There's somebody who possibly lived in the city and they fell into a position where they could make their money anywhere they moved. And so they recognized that buying that piece of property and moving off into a little bit more land and producing calories, right? And chickens and a garden and then possibly more livestock and goats. And this is very, very heavily based off of skills, but not skills that most people would recognize. It's basically skills of 100 years ago, how to do the most with less. And they don't focus so much on stockpiling stuff, but that doesn't mean that they won't, right? So there's overlap in all of these, and it doesn't necessarily mean that a homesteader couldn't be an excellent survivalist. Top-notch skills when you talk about going out into the bush and doing bushcraft. So somebody like myself, I work and live in the city, and I have some skills in bushcraft because I've spent lots of time in the military. I love to go camping. I spent a lot of my youth out and about. I was a Boy Scout like many others, and I can start a fire and I can make a shelter and all that stuff. I don't necessarily focus on that. I focus on putting away supplies to mitigate those risks that I feel are imminent in my society. So if I lose my job, hopefully me and my family will be set for at least a few months before things kind of settle out. If you can't go to the grocery store, or all of a sudden you can't find toilet paper, I think that's why I would put myself into the prepper category, but I'm aspiring to move towards the homesteading side. So homesteaders are very good at the skills like canning and drying food, or husbandry, or raising chickens, and producing calories, gardens and orchards. All of those things are great, and if you're well-rounded, even as somebody who lives in an urban environment, it's a great time to read up on such things so that you have some knowledge before you aspire to the next level, right? So put your comments down in the comment section if you learned anything. Even if any of the information I'm giving out, by all means, please hit the like button. That'll help out a lot. And we're going to move on to the next category in the classroom. Hope to see you then.